It was past midnight when the lights in the mansion flickered on. The millionaire, Ethan Cole, had been awake, unable to sleep as the sound of soft footsteps echoed from the kitchen below. At first he thought it was the maid, but when he quietly stepped closer, what he saw stopped him in his tracks. A little girl, no older than 7, stood by the counter, trembling, holding a small loaf of bread in her tiny hands. Her clothes were worn, her face pale, and her eyes filled with fear. She froze the moment she saw him, like a cornered bird ready to flee. Ethan didn't say a word at first. For a man known for his strict business rules and cold attitude, everyone would have expected him to shout or call the police immediately. But instead, something in her eyes reminded him of a time he'd tried to forget his own childhood. Hungry and alone before fortune changed everything, the girl clutched the bread tighter, whispering, "I'm sorry. I just wanted to feed my brother." Her voice cracked, and in that moment, the silence between them spoke louder than words. As Ethan slowly reached into his pocket, the girl took a step back, certain her fate was sealed. But what he did next left her speechless, would soon change both of their lives forever. What made this cold-hearted millionaire act with compassion that night? The answer would shock everyone who knew him. Ethan slowly crouched down, careful not to frighten her. He didn't reach for the phone or raise his voice, he simply looked at her, noticing the way her small hands shook as she hid the bread behind her back. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated, glancing at the door as if ready to run. "Lila," she whispered. "Please, don't tell anyone. I'll leave." Her voice trembled, and Ethan could tell she wasn't just scared of getting caught, she was scared of something much bigger. He led her to a chair, offering her a glass of water. She looked at it, unsure if it was safe to accept. The mansion's warm lights cast a glow over her face, revealing dirt smudges and tired eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Ethan noticed the torn edge of a school uniform beneath her oversized sweater. "Where are your parents, Lila?" he asked gently. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "It's just me and my brother," she said. "He's sick, and I couldn't let him go to sleep hungry again." Those words echoed through Ethan's mind. For years, his wealth had built walls around him, walls of comfort, silence, and distance. Yet, here was a little girl breaking through them with nothing but honesty and fear. He wanted to help, but something in her story didn't add up. Why was a child sneaking into a millionaire's mansion at night? And how did she even get past the guards? Something about Lila's presence felt like fate or a secret waiting to be uncovered. Ethan couldn't shake the unease growing inside him. Something about Lila's story didn't sit right. He had lived in this mansion for years, every door locked, every corner monitored by security cameras. Yet somehow, this little girl had slipped inside without triggering a single alarm. The more he thought about it, the more questions surfaced. Who had let her in? And why had she chosen his house out of all the others on the street? Lila sat quietly at the kitchen table, holding the bread as if it were treasure. Her eyes darted toward the window now and then, as if expecting someone to appear. Ethan noticed that fear, it wasn't the kind that came from getting caught stealing. It was deeper, heavier. He poured her some soup, pretending not to notice how quickly she ate. When she finished, she whispered, "You won't tell anyone, right?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "That depends," he said slowly. "Who are you hiding from, Lila?" She froze. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Before she could reply, the sound of an engine echoed outside the gates. Ethan's security lights flickered on, catching movement in the shadows near the fence. Lila's face turned pale. "They found me," she whispered, clutching the chair. Ethan's heart pounded. "Who?" he asked, stepping toward the window. But Lila only shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Please, don't let them take me back," she begged. And in that moment, Ethan realized this night was only the beginning of something far bigger than he'd imagined. Ethan's pulse quickened as the sound outside grew louder. Headlights swept across the long driveway, cutting through the mist that hung over the mansion grounds. He turned back to Lila, who now looked smaller than ever in the oversized chair, clutching the crust of bread like it was her last piece of safety. "Lila," he said firmly, but gently, "tell me who's out there." She shook her head, her lips trembling. "They're bad people. I didn't mean to come here. I just needed food." Her voice broke, and the fear in her eyes told Ethan she was telling the truth. Without another word, Ethan switched off the kitchen lights and guided her toward the hallway. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The mansion that once felt empty now felt alive with tension, every sound echoing through the silence. He could see shadows moving beyond the gate, 3 figures, maybe 4 trying to peer through the iron bars. Whoever they were, they weren't there by accident. The security cameras flickered, and for a split second, all screens went black. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone had hacked into his system. He reached for the emergency switch under the counter, but before he could press it, a loud bang echoed through the back door. Lila gasped and hid behind him. "They're coming," she whispered. Ethan took a step forward, heart pounding, as the door handle began to turn slowly. For the first time in years, fear not for himself, but for someone else gripped him completely. The door burst open with a sharp creak, and Ethan instinctively pulled Lila behind him. But instead of masked intruders, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Cole, are you all right?" It was Mason, the head of security. Relief flashed across Ethan's face for a second, till he noticed the uneasy look in Mason's eyes. The cameras went down, Mason said quickly. Someone's been tampering with the system from the inside. Ethan frowned. From the inside? That's impossible. But Mason didn't respond. His gaze shifted toward Leela, who was half hidden behind Ethan's arm. Sir, who is that? The question hung in the air. Lila's grip tightened on Ethan's sleeve, her eyes darting nervously between the two men. She's a child, Mason. She was just hungry, Ethan replied, trying to sound calm. But Mason's expression hardened. That's not just any child, sir. I've seen her photo before. Ethan turned sharply. What do you mean? Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. She's the daughter of the woman who went missing last month near the East District, the one tied to the charity scandal you've been investigating. The words hit Ethan like a wave. He looked down at Lila, who was now trembling, her face pale. Is that true? He asked. She didn't answer, but the tears welling in her eyes said enough. Before Ethan could process it, a noise echoed from upstairs footsteps, heavy and fast. Someone else was already inside the mansion, and this time, Ethan knew it wasn't security. Ethan spun toward the staircase, motioning Mason to stay with Lila. The footsteps above grew heavier, then stopped. The silence was deafening. Slowly, Ethan climbed the stairs, his hand brushing against the cold rail. As he reached the landing, a shadow moved near the hallway. Who's there? He demanded. A man stepped forward, his face pale and drawn, someone Ethan hadn't seen in years. You shouldn't have taken her, the man said, voice trembling. She doesn't belong here. It took a moment for Ethan to recognize him, Daniel Reed, his former business partner who'd vanished after being accused of embezzling from their charity fund. You're behind this, Ethan said quietly. You used the system, the cameras, everything. Daniel nodded, eyes darting toward the stairs. I didn't want her to come here, he said, but after her mother disappeared, she had nowhere else to go. She thought you could help. Ethan froze. Her mother? Daniel sighed. Her mother was the whistleblower, the one who tried to expose me. And your company? The truth hit Ethan like a storm. His empire, the wealth he'd built, was connected to the very corruption that destroyed Lila's family. Downstairs, Lila's faint sobs echoed. Before Ethan could speak, Mason appeared with Lila, but instead of pointing his weapon at Daniel, Mason turned it toward Ethan. I told you, sir, he said coldly. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. The realization sank in. Mason hadn't been protecting him all along. He'd been protecting the truth Ethan was never meant to find. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of betrayal sinking in as Mason's gun trembled in his hand. But before anything could happen, Lila stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the tension. Please stop, she whispered. Her eyes were filled with tears, not fear, just sadness. For a brief moment, it broke through the chaos. Mason's grip faltered, and Daniel took that chance to push the gun away. It clattered to the floor, echoing through the hall. Ethan quickly pulled Lila behind him, shielding her as the security team finally stormed in. Mason and Daniel were taken into custody, and as the police arrived, the truth began to unravel. The missing funds, the cover-ups, the lies, all of it traced back to Mason and Daniel's network, which had used Ethan's company as their shield. Lila's mother had discovered everything and disappeared trying to protect her children. In the days that followed, Ethan made it his mission to set things right. He reopened the charity under Lila's mother's name, ensuring it truly helped the families who needed it most. Lila and her brother were placed in safe care, but Ethan visited often, promising them they'd never go hungry again. Standing by the kitchen window one evening, Ethan watched the sunrise touch the same counter where it all began. He realized that night hadn't just exposed corruption, it had reminded him of something priceless: compassion, humanity. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change the course of more than one life forever.